Talk Loud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now here's your host, Tony Safoian.
So today in our headquarters, we have a very special guest, someone I've known for a long time, Justin Slaten, current CTO of Avinew.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. I've watched some of your episodes and it's great. It's great content.
Now, the best content is actual CTOs working at customers in the trenches. And this is the best kind of episode for me to do. I mean, I love talking to our own people and I love talking to Googlers, but I think the ecosystem, wants to hear the most from people like you in your shoes.
Oh, thanks. Definitely been on boots on the ground for quite a while in the cloud, and that sounds weird, boots on the ground in the cloud, but yeah, I've been using Google for quite a long time, Amazon for quite a long time.
Yeah,
all the different very cloud forward.
Let's talk about our history together. I think we've known each other since probably 2004, 5, 6, the Wasserman Media days. I think our engagement there was kind of along the Microsoft ecosystem. We didn't really have a Google business back then, 2004, 2005. But then we followed each other in our careers. You've had an amazing trajectory. The last time we worked together, it was at TrueCar, which I think today still remains one of our great success stories. We have it published everywhere, and that was great. And now you're at Avinew.
Yep, a startup. So I figured this was one of my last shots to do a startup.
Yeah,
I'm getting up there, and my heart can only handle so much. But it's nice. It's actually, you hear about the work-life balance at startups are off, but this is we have a lot of really experienced leaders.
Yeah.
Who really know the space, and it's really close to my house, which is the first time I've never had a commute.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying it, but it's definitely a different ball game.
So it's a startup that's like in LA, actually north of LA, which is fantastic because we hear about all the density in the Bay Area, and like LA's kind of, our reputation's getting up there with like the whole startup scene and how much venture capital is being deployed here, which is great. So your story is one of those. And I think literally, if I know where you live, it's like literally in your backyard this time.
Yes, it's 6 minutes. I can't even. We're in the auto insurance space for autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles, and I drive a Tesla. And I was a very early adopter of Teslas, but I can't even use autopilot on my way to work because the commute is so short. I can't do phone calls, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, no podcast, no phone calls. Those are the things I miss about a long commute, but I'd much rather have it this way.
Yeah.
So tell us about Avinew and the current. Let's cover that first, because just in a little blurb of what you said, that sounded super exciting, because we know that whole industry is being transformed, like so many traditional industries, in light of all the technology evolution that's happening. I'll also, like you, we also have we like cars. You and I, we have that in common. We talk about that a lot. But I was also an early Tesla adopter. So what does Avinew do, and how is it kind of transforming this traditional space?
Sure. I mean, what we're doing is we're reinventing auto insurance for autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles. And what that means is, what our belief is that as cars get safer, insurance has to change. Rates should go down. Traditional insurance usually focuses a lot on the driver and the driver's behavior. But as your vehicle gets more safe, you should pay less in premium. That wasn't my experience when I got a Tesla first.
That's right.
I got one of the first 1,000 Teslas made.
Yeah.
And I went to go get a quote, and it was
ridiculous.
I just didn't even know what to do, because I think it was as much, if not more, than my lease payment.
Yeah.
And so I know that's, Elon talks about it, about bringing down rates because he wants the cost of ownership to be extremely low. So we're doing things, and it's not just focused around Teslas, but we are focused on cars with this level 2 autonomy, which Tesla's autopilot is obviously one of the most forward ones out in the media. So a lot of cars these days have things like rear collision avoidance, and you hear the beeps and the automatic braking. All those things reduce accidents, and we're focused a lot on making the insurance more affordable for vehicles that are actually safer on the road.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think there was a period where Tesla was kind of allowing the ability for people to self-insure through Tesla because the traditional market just didn't have the right calculus around what it should cost. And it was being, I think, prohibitive to people's ability to buy Teslas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Elon Musk talked about it on the latest earnings call. Tesla started an insurance company, or they started selling insurance in California, and it is to lower the cost of ownership. It's just, it shouldn't be half of the cost of your lease payment or the cost of your lease payment. It just needs to be more affordable. And anything they can do to get cost of ownership down for these autonomous vehicles will get more and more people into them.
Yeah. And, insurance is a complicated business, highly regulated. It's state by state. Like, not every car manufacturer is going to go on this journey of being also an insurer, right? That's where, your Avinew plays a significant role, hopefully, in the future. And we talk about this a lot, like just cloud and technology, and what I'm, not only me, but what we're generally calling like the fourth industrial revolution, which autonomous driving definitely falls within, is absolutely challenging the traditional business models. And every traditional industry, insurance included, has been around forever, is completely being flipped on its head. And it's like going to be a bunch of startups like Avinew going in to disrupt the space. And the existential threat is to the traditional insurers, like, how are they going to respond?
Yeah, insurance has been around forever. It's a huge market. Auto insurance alone, I think, is over $250 billion a year in premiums. Everybody that has a vehicle has to have it.
It's the law.
And auto insurance companies they're not as technology forward as you would expect, but it's because the model works and it's been happening for a long time. So yes, it's ripe for disruption, but at the same time, there's, like you said, it's a heavily regulated environment. The way a lot of auto insurance companies grow is by they definitely keep a tap on what's going on in the environment and try to adopt as much of the third party technology as possible.
Yeah.
But like you said, with this fourth industrial revolution, liability is sat on the driver and the drivers generally, right. and what happens when the vehicle is driving itself, or the software that was made by the manufacturer is driving the vehicle. How does liability change?
Yeah.
So it's a huge question, and we're kind of at the forefront of that, and we're really excited.
You've always gravitated towards these types of companies. And I think if I think about Wasserman back when you were there, and then you went on to Netflix and TrueCar, of course. Like Netflix, I was like super proud of where you landed for Netflix, especially at that time.
Yeah, that was life-changing.
Right?
Yeah.
I can imagine. Like, they were really pushing the envelope, and now you're kind of in the driver's seat as CTO, transitioning another industry, challenging another industry. So congrats on all that. Really proud to have witnessed all of that progression. I want to go back to TrueCar a little bit, because that's when we most recently worked together most closely. And I think together we implemented G Suite. And let's talk about a little, like, in terms of how that decision was made, what impact it had on TrueCar, because we talk about the two elements of of our just cause, and one is around just sort of increasing productivity amongst the people, like the cultural impact, productivity impact, and then of course sort of changing the performance of the company.
Sure.
And there's a slew of things in Google Cloud and other technologies that make those things possible. But let's talk about the first piece with TrueCar. Sure.
I think that there's two stories, right? There's the one that the people that were sort of against bringing in G Suite, which there's always going to be the supporters and the sort of later adopters, we'll call them, the slower adopters. Yeah. But the story they think is that, here I came in with this G Suite or Google background and made the decision, this rash decision to just turn the company upside down one day and change to Google. But that's not really the case. It's not how I operate. But what happened is if you kind of look at the threats to the business, I've been in security for a long time, going back to my first job when security was really, your perimeter was your network, and you put firewalls there, and you kept the bad guys on the other side of the firewalls, and everything was sort of hosted in your environment. Like I said, I was very cloud forward and started adopting cloud technology as soon as it came out, and thinking, hey, if we can spend the majority of our money doing what's really proprietary and an advantage to us, and offload some of the infrastructure, et cetera, then we can really focus on what we're good at. And at Netflix, that was what we lived by. But sort of the weakest link in security at this point is your end users. It's unfortunate. There's people that are focused all day, every day on how do I get, a user to click on something, get on their computer, and
phishing
encrypt their hard
attacks,
drive. But phishing attacks,
social engineering.
I mean, some of these things are just really hard to look out for. And even at Netflix, one of the ways of thinking was, okay, from security, we had an enormous security team, but we will never spend the amount on security that Google will. And so where we can offload some things to them, a company that's definitely way bigger than we are, let's do that and take advantage of the huge investment they have, because they don't want a user account gets compromised there. You're talking about all kinds of problems. So using them as authentication and making sure that they're always verifying that the person is who they say they are, that's a huge advantage to us, and we should leverage that technology. So, coming into a place that's using a sort of, I'm not going to trash talk anybody, but just like a third party exchange host that is not really, that's not their focus. They get what comes with the territory, and it's a product. I mean, just being in the cloud doesn't mean that you're secure, but having an email provider that's locking things down and preventing people from clicking on links and making sure they are who they say they are, and throwing warnings in people's faces is something that you're not going to do as a small security team inside of a larger company, especially with people on the road, et cetera. So we did a lot of prep work and kind of user feedback sessions to get people familiar with Google and to get their feedback and how this might change their everyday job. And then we rolled out, but we did it in a very, as you know, and you probably remember the story, you guys came back and said that here's your timeline for implementing G Suite, which is, you guys follow, and I very much agree with it. A very,
prescribed approach.
Very prescribed approach. And it's done with reason. And a lot of it is focused on that end user adoption and training and getting them ready. Yes. I asked you to come and cut that in a half or a third or something like that. And,
I remember that.
We had to talk, and it was because we saw how the environment was changing and how the risk was elevating. So the risk was elevating extremely quickly, and if our technology or our capability to stop those types of attacks continued flat, we were at a much more elevated risk. So we went on a really extreme timeline, and we got it adopted, and we took advantage of the protection right away that Google was offering.
That's fantastic to hear that security angle so front and center in your kind of decision criteria, decision matrix. There's so much emphasis on like the collaboration and the unified communication and being on the same platform in an enterprise from where like everybody's graduating from college and high school. Like it's the only thing they've known. It's sort of the new productivity paradigm. We sometimes forget that the security part is as important, maybe more important from a CISO standpoint or CTO standpoint, but it is kind of, it's so well architected and so consistently effective. We almost take it for granted, but I don't remember a big G Suite deal that we sold that we didn't have a full security review. So it's definitely part of every process, and everybody's, I think, highly impressed that they get to benefit from this immense set of human and not human processes that are built into all of Google's infrastructure, Gmail with its, 1.5 billion users or something like that. And also being like one of the biggest targets in the world.
Sure. And then then you blink and you have another feature. That's the other thing. It's like things that you're not even thinking about, they're definitely thinking about. You go and you get you read an article or you read their newsletter and you're like, oh, this feature is coming out, or you get onto a trusted tester and you're like, wow, they were thinking ahead, or this is something I asked for and never expected to get, which you just wouldn't see, a non-technical company or somebody who's, even if you were deciding to do it yourself, I'm going to host my mail because it's going to be in my hands. You're not going to innovate that quickly.
That's right. So, again, you've had this at least a decade plus now, 15 years that I've known you, where you track like very innovative places, working on the edge. And that requires a couple of different things that I want to talk about. One is your leadership style and how you build teams and how you lead teams. I think a lot of IT organizations are transforming because the demands being put on them are very different than they are in the past. And I think all of our customers, as we talk about various cloud conversations, whether it's GCP or G Suite, they're all realizing that it's a great opportunity if it's executed well, but they have to change as leaders, but also their teams have to evolve.
Sure. Yeah. I saw an interesting change at Netflix because Netflix at the time that we brought in G Suite, there were 4 or 5 or 6 people. There was a team dedicated to Exchange administration.
Right.
And when I came in, we said, we're going to go to G Suite at Netflix. Those people, their initial thought was, oh, great, my job is gone. And we talked, and after I got them to stop hating me, I explained to them they're actually the most important people in this, not just throughout the transition because they understand the legacy back end, but they can also be on the forefront of, they know what the requirements have been. They know what the uptime has to be. They know how the users interact. And so most of them, I'd say 5 out of 6, if not 6 out of 6, took the time to kind of learn what they'd be going on to, and all had really successful careers there. And that's one thing I think is kind of helping people see, whether it's an end user or your technical staff, just kind of seeing the other side of the change curve, because the change curve is inevitable. Like people are going to hit the rock bottom and say, I'm helpless. I can't do my job anymore because I'm so unproductive. Everybody's going to go through that. It's like grief. But at the same time, I think a successful leader helps them see the other side of the change curve and get up that hill as quickly as possible. So that's sort of what it's about. It's helping people see, and this could be in auto insurance. This could be in anything where you're bringing in major change. It's just, there's a bright side to it. And so getting people up that curve as quickly as possible, I think is a strong leader.
Yeah, look, a leader that believes in people and believes in their positive intent, that believes in their ability to stretch and do things, I think, especially now, that's required more than ever, because this premise of like, we could just like kind of like throw out the old people and bringing new people, that's so far from reality. Like, who would let go talented engineers?
Exactly.
You would never do that.
Right.
You'd actually want them to stretch and be, and repurpose their, find new meaning in what they do, develop new skills. And part of that sort of career pathing and career planning work as leaders, I think is part of what makes people want to work in certain places, because they get that kind of embrace. And it's never more evident than going through some sort of a transformation where literally the things that you used to be in charge of are going to disappear.
Right.
So it's sort of that, it's like go time of making that a reality for them.
Yeah, that's huge. And I also think having really, I don't want to say, I hate giving really defined paths, which says like, people do thrive on less ambiguity and say, well, if you can give me steps to become this position, give them to me, prescribe it.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, in the enterprise, that's not really the case. And so what you really want to do is give them some high level goals and get them there, whether it's learning this new technology. Yeah. But one thing that I do think that people tend to focus on is thinking that management is that's the path that you have to go in order to climb the ladder.
I don't agree with that at all.
It's horrible. I mean, I think the saying is you take your best engineer and make them a manager. You lose your best engineer and get your worst manager. And it's not, I mean, I'm sure that's not always the case, right? I was an engineer to start with, and I hope that I'm a good manager.
But it shouldn't be an automatic assumption.
Right.
Like, it's not what they want oftentimes, and it's not even best for the company. But we also realized at SADA that a lot of our leaders did come from that. And the ones that have taken on those roles and are still here actually are thriving for the most part. But we just it was clear to us this year that we haven't done that good of a job in like the management training. It's management enabled, because like you don't learn that in school.
I was just having a conversation with someone on my drive over here, because I actually had a commute today.
Yeah.
But I was talking with somebody. He's been on the job market for quite a while, and he's been going on interviews and striking out for one reason or another. Mm. And he's really beaten down, and he kind of shared his last experience with me. But the commonality is that he's not getting any communication back from how he's doing on these interviews. So he's kind of like, he'll get really positive feedback in the interview, and we'll talk to you about next steps, and then he'll get ghosted. And he was saying, is this because of technology? Because it's easy to ghost people now? And I said, I think it's a couple of things. I think technology enables that behavior, and I have heard this more and more, like companies just not being great in the hiring process. Maybe they've got a lot of candidates and they're moving quickly, but I've always been, if someone interviews with me on site and they aren't going to make it, or they are going to, I like to communicate directly with them and tell them why or why not. And there's some,
I'm totally with you.
Environmental changes.
I'm totally with you. This ghosting thing is completely unacceptable. When you talk about people experience, employee experience, that extends to all your interview process.
Exactly.
Every part of that process, whether they get hired or not hired, they should leave feeling like you are a great company.
Exactly.
Ghosting them is not the way to do it.
You never know who you're gonna run come across. Maybe you'll be interviewing with that person one day, and you'd want the same, just like the treat one. Treat
like
someone how you want to be treated.
I think you just have to be consistent in your philosophy. Like,
right.
We just don't ghost people.
Yeah. So but I think leadership training, et cetera, investing in people that are going to be hiring managers that never have before, that those kind of things help. And we need a little bit of that, a little bit of, I would call it old school mentality, that human relationships are really important. Yeah. Even though we have technology, it's really easy to send someone a quick note and say, a quick text and say, hey, we're not going to be continuing in the interview process, but it would buy you a lot more maybe to have a good contact with them. And
it's also could be a little bit generational, to your point, and having that training, not only in interviewing, which actually it stands up a lot, like that's so important to have your hiring managers to interview well and understand the importance of their role in the recruitment process, but in every other part of the experience of the people in their teams is, we're always trying to, like, we want to be the best place to work. I'm sure Avinew wants to be the best place to work. We want people to have an exceptional experience from the first call from our recruitment team to their last day at SADA, right? And that a lot of that middle part, if the company is doing great and the company has great culture and the company is growing and it's exciting and all of that, then the variable remaining is their manager. Like, we really have to optimize for the manager, regardless of how well the company is doing otherwise.
Correct.
Because you're still going to lose people. if that person hasn't been trained on how to be a great manager, you're going to lose people in that team.
Yeah, there's an interesting, when you're a manager of managers, which I've been a lot.
Yeah,
there's interesting ways to gauge, how, when you're doing skip levels and engaging how that person is enjoying their manager, or how effective the manager is. And then one of the things I learned was kind of asking them about if they would go work for that person. Let's say you got the opportunity to go in your dream job.
Yeah.
And then you just find out that person is now going to be your manager.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make it more exciting to go to the job?
Right.
Does it make it it doesn't change my opinion? Does it make it like, yeah, I mean, I really don't want to, but now,
the money's
but it
good,
is my dream job. So
yeah.
I'm going to go do it. Or like, heck no, I'm not taking that job because I would never work for that person again. Yeah. And it's an interesting way to gauge that person.
We've deployed a new coaching platform for all of our managers, anybody who has like more than 3 people reporting to them. It's called Torch, torch.io. It's sort of a lot of one-on-one coaching, but a lot of it is remote. So it's like scalable. We're excited about that. It's not cheap, but I think the ROI should be tremendous if it works like 10% as well as it could. And then we also started running a broad-based employee NPS survey monthly. Yeah. That also tracks, like the scores do roll up based on manager. So it's important to keep the pulse. But at the end of the day, again, if we believe in like the execution of the company as a whole, and the benefits and all the sort of hygiene stuff, plus the growth and excitement, the weakest link could often be any manager that runs an important team. Well,
if it's of any help to you, any SADA employee that I've met has been happy to work here. So
I appreciate that. We're getting bigger though. So
yeah, it's hard to scale those things.
We have to get more methodical, and management training was just sort of even a blind spot for me in how we've deployed people's own evolution in their careers. Like, managers need to learn how to be better managers. Like, I need to learn how to be a better CEO, like every day, right? And then so let's shift over to technology, because in a lot of your roles, you've had to be the one to help make the important decision of build versus buy. And it's something that all technology leaders face. Obviously, we have certain views on it, but how do you determine what to do in each scenario, and what are some specific examples in your several roles that how you made those decisions?
Well, it's really easy, right? If you're the CIO, then you buy, and if you're the CTO, you build. No, it's you see where companies gravitate to when they're doing their pitches. But no, it's. I mean, like the roles are mixed anyway, and some companies you see different titles, but it's tough. I mean, number one, I've always led when I'm talking to a partner. I call them partners and not vendors. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a huge relationship, and we're not going to be in it if you're not a partner. If you're just selling a software, it's off the table.
Nice.
Whether it's a small contract or a big contract, because small ones can get big, and then you have to keep your finger on the tap of that as well, because you have to stay engaged and make sure that relationship continues. So there's nurturing and making sure that you keep that going. But in this day and age, you can pretty much build anything, and I've seen it.
True.
Netflix was very build. Don't use third parties that are smaller than us, because
risk.
There's a big risk if the company disappears and you're dependent on them. I remember some. Sorry. So at Netflix, we'd never wanted to use a third party that was smaller than us, because if they disappeared, it would be a big impact to our business, and we could build anything.
Right.
But there were still some times, I remember I went to bat one time with Reed about a big thing to implement Google authentication. Ultimately, we needed to use a partner, essentially a bridge to the Google authentication. And the partner was smaller than us. they were willing to give us their code base, et cetera. Just, some different things to assure that even if they disappeared, which they didn't like having that conversation, but I had to say, hey, if you disappeared, then what would happen to us?
Look, you're Netflix. You can have any kind of conversation with any vendor. It's totally fine.
But ultimately, it was a disagreement. And I remember some readisms that came out of that meeting. But, he agreed to trust us because that was our area of expertise. And he sort of disagreed and committed, and which is, a great thing in business. It's just a great CEO. And it ended up being really successful, and that company is doing very well now. But ultimately, I remember saying in that conversation, he said, "What would it take for you to build this?" I said, "Well, give me a year and 200 engineers, and we'll get like 80% of the way that this company has gotten." And it's just at that point, I applied the same mentality about, do I want to be in the business of authentication, or do I want to be in the business of securing Netflix and its employees and its customers, and focused on that? And so that goes into every decision making. You could build almost anything, but if you put the right evaluation and weigh, and there's always a cost involved.
Absolutely.
But just make sure you kind of know what's important to you and what you should be building.
Look, we even internally kind of think of it that way, but the way that we see our customers express it and really aligns with our philosophy is that it's okay to buy or outsource things that are not strategically important to your ability to execute. You should absolutely build things that are unique to you. You should insource. You should have your own people that are doing things that are the essence of your competitive advantage.
Exactly.
Where you need to greatly outperform the market. But you're not going to greatly outperform the market in like compute, storage, authentication, payroll, like things like that.
Yeah, right? you want 20 people racking and stacking servers, or would you rather have those 20 people building software? And that's not. I mean, look, the jobs are still out there for people. I mean, it's just shifted. Now you're going to work at AWS or something like that, or I've had these conversations with storage providers that I've had long relationships with back to early 2000, and they used to sell me SANs and whatnot and hard drives, and they were talking about sort of the shift in their careers, and it wasn't that hard drive sales were disappearing.
Right.
They just changed. They're focused more on a few gigantic customers.
Intel is selling a lot of CPUs.
Yeah, that's true.
They're just not going in
Someone
million little closets. They're going in, massive multi-football sized data centers at a scale that I think hard to imagine.
Right.
What's happening right now. I think that this period is going to be remembered, even for people like us who've been doing kind of cloud stuff for 15 plus years, is going to be remembered, I think, as maybe the biggest 5 to 10 years of our lives with regards to how much change we're going to see. It's almost like we've been preparing the last decade plus like for this moment, because a lot of the earnings stuff came out from AWS and Microsoft and Google, etc., and all the analysts, there's a lot of data now as far as how we're doing in this, like right now, Q1, 2020. And I think they said like now 8.5% of the known existing IT spend is in the cloud, up from 6% last year. Wow. So it's up, 30% or something. Yeah. But God, it's early.
It is. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, the numbers don't lie, and everybody's focused on it. I mean, even when you go to companies that you wouldn't imagine are transforming, which we'll circle into that, because I think you've probably heard my rant on digital transformation, but everybody has some sort of presence at this point, and if they're not looking at it, then they have to be, and it's obviously showing in the numbers.
I think all traditional enterprises are facing an existential crisis, and I think for every one of them, there's 100 like Avinew who are challenging, the old paradigm. And look, we service both types of customers. And I think for the most part, like the startups are going to do what they're going to do, and they're digital natives. They don't have the technical debt. They don't have, the big cultural shifts necessarily that need to be made. But I'm rooting for a lot of the traditionals to also make it and also transform, like for the betterment of all the jobs and how much of an impact like to the economy that they have. So we're rooting for them, and we work with many of them, and we learn often from the startups. We learn about like their velocity and their how they think, and we try to inject some of that into the enterprise. And for the enterprise, we learn about like their governance and project management, sort of just level of execution around those things, change management, things like that. And we try to obviously bring best of both worlds to our customers. But I think it's really early. I think it's super exciting, and I think most of what will determine how well some of our clients do is the leadership. Like, what is the technology and line of business leadership in those customers, and how are they willing to execute in these challenging times?
Yeah. Have you coined a term yet for, the digital transformation term drives me nuts, because in the last, I don't know, 15 years of companies I've been at, for sure, they started in a digital age. Yeah. And there's no digital transformation. These were digital born companies. Now, what I've come into, even at the small, on the smallest end of the spectrum, is you started a company that was born in the digital age, and they have 3 to 4 products to do every little task. So you might have a group,
drives me crazy,
using 3 different CRMs. Yes. Or one group is using this CRM, this one, and then I have a term for it, but I'm not going to say it because it's a bad word. But the digital cluster or whatever. and so, have you guys coined a term for those companies?
No, it drives me crazy. We're dealing with even very large enterprise customers who are maybe born in the last 15 years, who literally own everything. Yeah. They have bought everything. 3 options for video conferencing, 4 options for like file storage, 2 different authentication things. And part of it is because of M&A, but the other part is like the departmental empowerment of running a credit card. Yeah. And look, I'm very interested in helping customers simplify their architecture, but also their security posture. Right. Like it's not super good to own like, G Suite with Drive and with real sort of authentication through 2-factor and all of that. Like, but then also like have people with company data running in Box, or something like that. Like, that's really not good.
Yeah, it's hard from a security standpoint and a budget perspective. I mean, you're paying for video conferencing is a good example of that. Like, you'll see the same company send you 3 different links depending on where it comes from, with 3 different video conference people. But yet, if you're a G Suite subscriber, you get Meet.
Yes.
So it's interesting. I've always wanted to like figure out the term for that, but it drives me nuts. And I know that there's plenty of customers that are going through
gluttony.
Digital gluttony. There you go. I like it.
Yes, we own Meet, but we want to pay for Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and also like those people have Skype, and it's great. Yeah, no, it's funny. And then there's this whole on Twitter, I follow a lot of like startup people and with their products and what they're backing. Like, there's this new category being born of what they call like the uber luxury SaaS class of products. That's like the Superhuman and Notion and these things that are like as if Gmail is not capable of doing really good like zero inbox workday like planning and execution. Like, you need to own G Suite plus pay $30 a month for another email client on top of like. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's pretty insane too. When you start to look at all the per seat costs of ownership for the ecosystem.
Because it's not like if you buy Superhuman, you don't need Gmail.
Right.
Like, you still need G Suite.
You still need the platform.
Or like Notion HQ, like by itself, like you still are going to pay for Drive and or Dropbox or something like that. So yeah, there's this Louis Vuitton class of SaaS applications. Yeah. That's like super... the VCs are super into now. But
well, I love Slack, but my email hasn't disappeared yet. So.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, look, actually, I'm super excited how I've had some of these conversations with Google and with Javier Soltero, who is the new VP of G Suite, who I love and admired for many years. in his Microsoft days and being acquired by Microsoft. He made like the best email app at the time, which was acquired by Microsoft and is now sort of Outlook Mobile. And we have these conversations, and I think the Google G Suite product roadmap is going to surprise a lot of people over the next couple of months. Yeah, so we're excited about that.
They're definitely the forefront of innovation, and like I said, I mean, things that you wouldn't even expect. You're lucky because you have you have some early awareness of it, but people are. It's kind of like it's doing the things that you haven't even thought of yet, and then those things will just come available.
Totally.
One day it shows up and it's great.
Yeah. Well, what else are you on sort of our final thoughts? What are you super passionate about right now or excited about going into 2020?
So just the short term?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just saw a lot of announcements come out of CES, and obviously I've been focused on auto and seeing all the cars that are going to be enabled with autonomy. And I think a lot of people were surprised because there were some sleepers in there. You saw
the Sony car.
Yeah. Well, and they were very clear that's a concept, and they're engineers. So PowerPoints, et cetera, don't cut it. You have to create something. Yeah. But but there's a lot of players out there. But even like Hyundai and Genesis, you saw the Super Bowl ads. Mm-hmm. Everybody watched the ads. I mean, they were great, and companies that weren't really making a big fuss about it, because you hear a lot about Tesla, and they're obviously doing amazing, and their stock is oh my god
crazy.
But there's a lot of the traditional companies are way ahead or further than you might think, and so I think there's going to be a lot of this level 2 autonomy out this year. Mm-hmm. that you'll see. Cadillac made a really nice release, and I love that car, like the Escalade. Mm-hmm. It's what we have to pack our family into because we have a lot of kids. Well, 3, and we play hockey, so hockey bags. So we need that autonomy to come to big vehicles, and it's happening. So that's near term. I'd love to hear your prediction as well. Like we talked about, we're gearheads. Yeah. We love vehicles. I secretly have a gas, ICE vehicle that that sort of gets me that smell of gas and thrill. The interesting thing for the long term to me is what happens to those people that are collectors of vehicles and aren't going to convert them to some sort of autonomy. And that's where you look at the things that Elon is working on, and are these things going to go on some sort of sled? And like you might not even get to rev your engine, but at least you get to sit in that 60s Mustang and feel the steering wheel. But
I think that in like 30 years, driving might be outlawed.
Yeah,
that's what I think. And I think just like you can't take horses on the street, but you can go to the stables.
Right.
If you want to drive, you got to go to a track.
That's an interesting point.
And I also think that my daughters will they're 7 and going to be 9. I don't think there's going to be any real viable reason to have them own their own car out of the gate. Like the reason I have a car is because I like to drive my kids around, like take them to school and carry stuff. But I don't see any upside to getting my 16-year-old a car that they have to themselves drive.
Right.
Whether it's going to be Uber, semi-autonomous, the timing, who knows, right? Uber, Lyft. But I said that's I think when my kids were born, I said that I don't see my kids ever having a driver's license. And people are they thought I was crazy back then, but they're like, yeah, I see that. So that's my prediction. I think Elon Musk has said the same thing. I don't think I invented this statement, but yeah, they're not. Driving a car will not be legal on the streets forever.
My 8-year-old has already claimed my Tesla, and I have the same thought. I don't think when he in 8 years number one, he's probably not going to want that vehicle if he is choosing a vehicle. But number two, I don't think that I think that is going to completely change. Might not be getting his driver's license because the car will be driving him.
Yeah. I see no upside to teenagers driving around the streets like with cell phones and like this. I don't see any upside for that. So, hey, the future is exciting. We are fortunate enough to be working on the cusp of it with great customers. So I appreciate your friendship and your partnership all through the years. And I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah, same here. And same goes to you. I definitely, when I talked about that partnership, I keep in touch with people that I know are going to help me along no matter where I go, where I end up. I send people to you all the time, and it's because I want people to have someone that are invested in their business too and invested in their success. And you guys stay on the forefront of technology, and like you talked about, you care about your company and your people, and it definitely is seen out there when you're working with you guys. So it's great.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.